Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Jared Hornsby, and I'm here today to help answer any general or technical questions that you may have. But before we get started, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, The Power of Composable Content, and wish you a happy new year. Here's today's timing breakdown. These numbers are just rough, so please don't hold us to these. At any point during today's webinar, if you have a question, please don't hesitate to submit using the Ask a Question tab at the left side of your screen. And you can chat with your fellow attendees by clicking the audience chat. It's also going to be at the bottom of your screen. Please let us know where you are coming in from. And you can also download some of the great resources we have available to you in the Event Resources tab. Here's a bit about us over at CMS Wire. We were founded in 2003, and we cover the primary topics that you see here on this slide. You can read some more of our great content and register for upcoming conferences and webinars, all by visiting cmswire.com. I'd like to thank today's sponsor for making today's webinar possible. Contentful is the intelligent composable content platform that unlocks all of the organization's digital content to deliver impactful customer experiences. Over on the Contentful side today, we have Sarah Sullivan, who's the VP of Solution Engineering. Sarah, take it away.
Thank you, Jared, and welcome everybody. Glad you're all here and joining us here today. As Jared mentioned, I lead our global solution engineering function here at Contentful. And our team is really focused on prospects and customers and trying to better understand how do they solve building digital experiences today and how we might help them do that in a much more efficient and effective manner into the future. Ultimately, to help them, improve lead generation, grow engagement rates and hopefully improve conversion rates. And I'm super excited today to be speaking with you all about composable content strategies and how an organization should be thinking about this and potentially setting themselves up for success into the future. And I'm very lucky and fortunate to be joined today with Karen McGrain from Autogram. Karen, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And thank you to the folks from CMS Wire. I'm really happy to be here today. So I'm excited to be able to talk to Sarah from Contentful about the promise of composable platforms. I've been working in the information architecture and content strategy space for longer than I'd like to admit. I got my start in the late 90s, and I have seen the space evolve quite a bit. I'm the author of 2 books. My book, Content Strategy for Mobile, it was really my attempt to explain for the burgeoning world of new devices why structured content was such an important approach or strategy to think through. I also have a second book called Going Responsive that explains to organizations from a marketing perspective or from a process perspective what they need to do to adapt to responsive web design. Right now, I'm a partner at Autogram. My other business partners are Jeff Eaton, who is also a well-known CMS architect, and Ethan Marcotte, who coined the phrase responsive web design. And we spend our days working with generally large enterprise clients to help them figure out as they're going through replatforming, a digital transformation, how they should think about modeling their content and ensuring that their design system and their web production processes work for their teams. So I think that's a great topic of conversation for us to discuss today.
I love it. It's the perfect segue. Karen, I have to tell you, I shared with my team here at Contentful that I was going to be speaking with you all today. And the number of accolades that rolled in about you, they were like, no, Karen is the original, one of the original thinkers on this topic of headless and composable. You're talking to Karen, he wrote the book before it was a book. And he wrote the idea before, now everyone's doing it. So, I'm thrilled and honored to get the chance to say something.
That's so nice to hear. I've been a fan of Contentful since Contentful got started. I actually had many conversations with Sasha, your former CEO and chief strategy officer now over the years. And also, I should say, I use Contentful for my own website, KarenMcGrain.com. I like it that much. I mean, honestly, I moved off WordPress and I think Contentful is way better. That is just my personal professional opinion.
Well, we're lucky to speak to you both as a consultant and a strategist as well as a user. So this will be good advice here today. All right, let's jump in. I think we should probably start with some groundwork of what are some definitions. And so when we talk to marketers we hear a lot of them using this term composable. When you kind of wash this face, a lot of people are using this term composable. Maybe let's start with, from your point of view, when you think of composable architecture, what does it mean to you? How do you define it for yourself and for maybe the organization that you're speaking to?
Yeah. So I think it might help if I frame this with a little bit of context over how we got here. And if you think about, I think maybe the second wave of CMSs, the first wave was really like late 90s, sort of real server side stuff. But CMS and the power of marketers to be able to publish to the web without having to get developers involved, I think really started with the early blogging platforms. So Movable Type and WordPress and, products like that came onto the market. And for the enterprise space, similarly, that model took over into what I sometimes describe as monolithic systems. So what that means is that in all of those platforms, the content layer and the presentation layer are what's called coupled. So they're kind of locked together. And it's difficult to get the content back out again to do other things with it because it's so tightly tied to the presentation. And so that worked fine when all we had was websites. But one big inflection point in the industry was when mobile hit the scene. And all of a sudden, organizations really had to figure out, oh, wait a minute, we have to get our stuff onto different size devices and different screens. And we can't just have it attached to one web page. That led to, I think, an explosion of new device types that are on the market now. And when you look at the space today, it's way more than just smart, cell phones. Yeah, organizations at enterprise scale are usually dealing with digital signage. They might be dealing with kiosks. They might have, I've certainly worked with clients that needed to publish to voice assistants or chatbots. There's just all kinds of places that content might need to live. So fortunately, there was a second, I think, inflection point, which is the development of cloud services. So now, instead of, a legacy system having to be something that, you had to maintain the infrastructure for, we've moved to a market where products like this can be delivered over the cloud. They can be delivered through microservices and APIs. And so what that means is that businesses now have the capacity really to be able to pick and choose the solutions that are right for them. They're not locked into having to buy everything from one vendor, and they can optimize for what they need to optimize for. If it's commerce or if it's advertising or, whatever they want to do for analytics, they have choices. And so what that has led to is, I think, an explosion in what has been called headless CMS, meaning it doesn't have the presentation layer. You can do whatever you want there. But we really even matured beyond headless at this point. And that's where Composable comes in. Because it's more than just the CMS. It's the orchestration layer, and it's being able to manage all of that as a system. And there are products that can do that very well, like Contentful, that because they've thought through really the whole package. And but when I talk to clients about this, I think what I usually start with is that the technology here is really just an enabler. And it's like we're lucky now that we have, 20, 25 years of historical development in this space to be able to get to a place where Composable is possible. And it can deliver a lot more value, but the people and the process piece of it is just as important. And if organizations aren't, they have to make a mindset shift into thinking about their content in a different way, a reusable way, a flexible way, a composable way, where you're dealing with chunks of content rather than just web pages.
Yep. I'm so glad you pointed that out. I oftentimes wonder if customers fall into this trap of thinking, I'm going to go buy a new piece of software or technology or platform, and I'm going to operate exactly as I do today. And if you don't go through that transformational work that you're talking about changing the people in the process and the way you think about content reusability, you're not going to get the value back out of the platform like you could if you actually went through the transformational work. It sounds like is that where you see customers struggle as well?
100%. And I think mature clients are starting to come to the realization that like the tool is not what's going to save them. That, and perhaps some of the problems that they've had in the past was that they put too much responsibility onto what the tool was going to figure out for them and not taking the responsibility to say, oh, we have to actually figure out like what content do we want to use? How should it be structured? What metadata do we need? And all of that planning, if you don't do it, you're going to wind up with a system that doesn't deliver the value that you could get from it. You're going to blame the tool. I mean, it's just extremely common for everybody to, be like, oh, well, we're just going to get a new one. And it's like, well, that's, now you have two problems.
Yeah.
I definitely see it happening, particularly with organizations that are moving from a legacy system to a composable system, that they think they can do what's sometimes referred to as a lift and shift migration. Like, let's just take what we have and we're going to move it over to this new system and it's going to work the same way. We'll just copy all the fields over and do everything the way that it worked in the old system. And it's like, well, you just replicated the problem you used to have. So it really does require some thoughtfulness, but the fact that a composable system allows you to be that thoughtful, I think is the advantage of it.
We see that when we talk to organizations and they say, you talk about this mind shift of before it used to be the content and the context, how it was going to be displayed was all commingled in one place. And so if I was a marketer, I was going in and not only creating what I want the words on the screen to be or the assets, the images on the screen to be, but I was also configuring the layout and I was designing the look and the feel and, where's the call to action going to be on the page? And so oftentimes these people that come to us from this mindset of that old world trying to come into headless, they get confused and they're like, well, where do I control the layout? And it's like, oh, no, this is the new way of thinking of separate the layout from the actual content. And now you can actually build content at scale, right? You can build it much faster because you're not having to think about how it's going to be displayed at the end result. Do you see that mindset shift a challenge for, well, I'll call maybe some of the users, some of the marketers, for example?
Oh, for sure. I have said for years that the legacy of print is long, and we spend so much time as people like only being able to communicate on a printed page, and the content and the layout were so inextricably intertwined. It was very hard to imagine that they're separated. And I do think this is the key for many organizations, is helping people understand, like, you can control what shows up where without necessarily controlling that through a layout standpoint. You control that through metadata. You control that through the structure. And it's not like you can't even ever look at anything. Like, you can have a preview that will show you what things will look like. But the goal is that you understand that content is going to be living in lots of different places. And so when you're imagining what you're creating, you have to think through the whole system. Like, if you want your product descriptions to show up both on web and mobile and in a kiosk in the store, you have to plan for all of those scenarios and know how that's going to work in all scenarios. You can't be obsessing about the layout for one platform.
Yeah. Okay. I want to come back to, I think a topic we're going to talk about is composable content. One other thing before I get there. There seems to be some confusion in the market and, I'm not sure. Well, I have an idea where it's coming from, but, it seems like everybody is calling their platform of the day composable. And it's almost to the point where I feel like the idea of composable is so diluted that it's actually doing nobody a favor. And so I'm kind of curious, how do you think about what true composable is versus maybe a solution that's just slapping it on, as an endpoint kind of thing?
But yeah, that's a great question. And, I do think in the CMS and digital experience management space, there's a lot of organizations that will basically, to get the sale, they're going to say, yes, of course you can use it that way. I mean, I had seen, it's like you can use Adobe Experience Manager headlessly if you want to. That would not be a good use of your money, but you could do that. You can use WordPress headlessly, but that it doesn't make it composable. And I think there really does need to be a distinction that for some systems, like the way they're supposed to be used, like the way the product really intends itself is to be used as a coupled system. Like the value of that platform is that you are using it because you want it to control both the content and the presentation layer. And while I think that's an outdated way to think about content, there are certainly scenarios in which that makes sense for some organizations. But I think that for marketers that need to operate at scale, for growing businesses, for global businesses, for marketers that are really thinking about how to deliver personalized, tailored messaging to their audiences, a composable platform is the way to go for that. It will actually work more effectively. And that's what its strength is. If you're choosing a composable platform, you want one that is built that way from the start. And that's how it has always been intended to be used.
I couldn't agree more. At Contentful, we oftentimes talk about multi-brand, multi-region, multiple products. And how do you actually support the idea of creating content once and having it flow down appropriately? Because in some cases, you do want differences by region or by product or by, right? The deviations continue on. But you also want the ability to actually create once and reuse everywhere. And I'll give a quick example. One of our customers is BMW of the UK. And they came to us and they had 160 different dealerships. Now, some of their content, they want it to live at kind of the parent level where the description of a car is the description of a car. It's not going to change depending on, which dealer is selling it. However, at the dealership level, they want the ability to have some nuances. Maybe if I'm hosting a car wash event on Saturday to drive people in to, come in and do a test drive, like that's something that's going to be unique to my dealership for a particular, point in time. So, they came to us and they said, we want an easy way to be able to create the certain sets of information or content once and automatically distribute that out to all of our dealerships and give those dealerships freedom to have some nuances, some differences on their local websites as well. And that to me is a great example of content at scale, right? Create once, reuse everywhere, which kind of leads me into my next maybe question back for you is this idea, we talked about composable architecture. We've taken it one step further. We call it composable content, create once, reuse everywhere across all these digital channels. And I'm curious, when you're thinking about the value of composable content, what are some of the advantages that you find it delivers to organizations?
Oh, do I have an answer for that? And there's so much value for organizations. I think probably the one I'll start with is the one that you just mentioned, which is the idea that you can reuse your content more effectively. And the number, like I tell people when I'm working with clients, like, how many times are you copying and pasting the same content into different systems? And that might mean systems for different channels, like you're trying to publish things out to email or, mobile versus web, maybe other platforms you need to publish to. It might also be work that you're doing internally, like you're gathering content from stakeholders and it goes into an Excel spreadsheet and then it's a Word document and it's an Excel spreadsheet. It's in a Photoshop file and you're managing all those variations. And anytime a marketer can find ways to streamline that, they're immediately going to be more effective. Like that's just a pure time savings that allows you to scale and to maximize the value you're getting from the people. I think, as we've touched on before, the prospect of multi-device and multi-channel delivery is really powerful. And honestly, like for any business, I think in the scenarios you described, I think there's a lot of franchises and retail businesses and, businesses that genuinely have to manage many, many device types. Like I actually just changed my cell phone service to a new carrier this weekend. So I had to go into the store. And, it was really notable, like how many screens there were in there that were displaying prices and plans and information. And, that's just one store. That's, it's a nationwide brand. That if you have a challenge like that, you're going to have to go with composable platform. Like it's the only thing that's going to solve that problem for you. I think that translation is a really powerful example. And the way translation works basically is if something changes on the page, you have to send it back out to be retranslated. And that costs money. So if you can have a way that you don't have to send the entire page out to be translated, but instead you can only send the chunk out that changed to get retranslated, that's a huge cost savings. I had a client where the cost savings for translation paid for the CMS project because they were spending so much money on, it's a global brand and stuff changes, and just simply not having to send everything out for retranslation every time was a big win for them. But I think it's even more than that. It's localization is, I think, the really compelling story. Like, as you mentioned, there's things that you want to have control of, at the organizational level. But then you also want to be able to give local teams or local markets the flexibility to do what they want. I just worked with a B2B client that is a global brand. And one of the challenges that they're facing is that everything is thought of as a translation problem, but not as a localization problem. So they may have, for example, case studies that are appropriate for the German market or the Japanese market, but they're not featuring those on the German language or Japanese language versions of the website. It's all US companies because it's the parent page that gets translated as the English language version. What if they could give the power to teams in local markets to create that content themselves, to write the content themselves so that they're speaking in a way that's appropriate for that market? All of that is, I think, necessary for global brands to truly grow in those markets. Like those markets really want to see, like, you understand our problems. And I also think personalization just in general is a big advantage for this. If marketers really want to get to the level of being able to tailor messaging in a more granular way for different industries or for different regions, or for what they know about the customer based on the data that they have, that is going to require the kind of model that composable content supports, having those fragments that can then be tailored for those audiences. But if I had to sum it up, I think the real value for organizations as they implement a composable platform like Contentful is that if you do your planning right, it's going to put control in the hands of marketers that too often is still in the hands of developers. And if anybody out there has ever suffered through having to fill out Jira tickets to make updates to their digital content, it's like there is a better way. And it's not that your platform will never need a developer. It's that if you think about it in a composable way and you think about what the orchestration layer is going to do, you want to ensure that the marketers are the one that can just go in and make updates and make changes without like having it take weeks and weeks to make that change happen. And that's definitely possible.
Yeah. Your commentary about needing developers, like, this is the theme we hear from almost every organization as they come to Contentful and go, tell us what's different about Contentful. And the first thing we say is, oh, what if you could actually make all of those edits and creation of all those pages on your own without ever having to get a developer involved? And all you see is light bulbs go off. Like,
yeah.
Oh, you mean I can get out of the business of saying, no, we can't do that, into yes, we can. And it creates so many more opportunities for marketers to really respond to the market much faster when they can actually create and modify and change and add, digital experiences on their own without having to ask for help from a dev or an engineer or a technical audience.
Absolutely. I really think, like, if that's a theme of my entire career, it's that you want to put that power in the hands of the marketers and the communicators that are actually creating that, not have it be, a development process where, it has to go through engineering to make that happen. I think it's really important. What I also find really interesting is that, at least historically, the real driver for moving to headless and composable platforms came from developers. Developers also want this, and that's why I think it's great that, we want to be here talking to marketers, but like from what I've seen, it's in many cases, it is the development team that is pushing for moving to a composable model. They want to use whatever they want on the front end, and they don't want to have to do theming in the content management system. They want that separated out. So, and it's marketers are feeling like, oh, if the developers want this, is this going to make this worse for me? And I just want to say no, like with the right planning and thoughtfulness about how that system is going to work, it's going to be better for both teams, and both teams are going to be happier. And that's a big win for an organization.
Employee satisfaction, it's the one metric that never makes it into a business case, but I feel like it should. Like another version of that developer response I hear is, can I just get out of the business of responding to tickets of like, change this title to be, X, or add a period here, your grammar's were, like developers don't want to be in that world of responding to those tickets. Like they would much rather go build the cool next, UI element or, a carousel or something fun and interesting on the website, not responding to tickets on spelling errors.
It's so true. I really focus on how much time is wasted. That is your valuable marketing resource. That is your valuable engineering talent. That is going to something that takes twice as long and just is essentially a waste of time. Like if you had better automation in place, you would not have to do that. And you would get more value from your people.
Can we talk a little bit about consumer expectations? So you kind of talked about this, right? This idea of like creating content once and then having it be used across all of these different digital channels, whether it's the website, the mobile app, having it power social media, have it power email campaigns, signs inside of a store, right? The list goes, Alexa devices, right? The list goes on and on and on. And I feel like we've seen this trend recently where consumers expect, they're going to go through that customer journey, by the way, right? They're going to see an ad on social media, click on it, be redirected to the website, then be, asked to download the mobile app to do the shopping, and then get an email saying, hey, thanks for buying from us. Here's some NFAQ on, our shipping options or returns. And, then you're back on a knowledge support site. Like they go through that customer journey across all of those different digital channels, and they expect it to be consistent. Right? I mean, that's the norm now. And I feel like when we talk to so many organizations, those are separate teams that are managing all of those different digital channels. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a story. I'll keep this customer name nameless, but it's a pretty large retailer. And they were sharing with us about how they were doing a 15% off campaign on appliances. And I'll simplify the story a little bit. They essentially said we have three main channels. We are going to put this, 15% off on this, appliance on our website. We're going to post it to social media because we're going to drive traffic to the website to buy from social media. And we're going to send out an email campaign. Well, the email campaign, they forgot to get in touch with that team and it never went out. And so they essentially lost a day, a couple days, a week of traffic being driven to their website to go and take advantage of that sale. And I think all of these marketers go, I'm going to, they think about the KPI, but I'm going to increase leads and I'm going to increase conversion rates. In this case, this is lost revenue, right? Like if people are coming to the site, you're going to go back and get that, or it's a lot harder to go back and get that revenue. And so I'm curious, I call this the kind of the cost of do nothing. What do you help customers think about not only how they can increase their metrics, but also avoid the decrease of their metrics, their KPIs?
Yeah, I love it. No, I like that question a lot because I really believe that for most organizations, they don't necessarily have the metrics or the tracking that they need to understand if the content is doing for them what it needs to. And I think what I have seen is that thinking of content in a composable way is an inflection point where organizations can also start tracking what their goals are for their content, what we like to call an autogram, what the intention of the content is, and having metrics then in place that can evaluate the quality of the content. Like, is it, does it adhere to your brand standards? Does it, are the images there? Does is it meet our goals for readability or grammar or whatever? Health checks, meaning like, is the page getting any views at all? Is the page accessible? Is the front end performance for the page? Like, how long does it take the page to load? And then effectiveness, like, is the content doing what we wanted it to do? And if organizations don't have a way to track the intention of the content and then have meaningful metrics in place that they believe can actually evaluate what that intention was, the metrics that they wind up with are often not very useful. It's like, yeah, you can see how many people visited this page, but what does that tell you? Yeah. And I think that at least what I have seen is that organizations that are thinking about this in a really smart way are the ones that are moving away from wanting URL level metrics, and they want metrics that are actually attached to the content itself, because they want a way to evaluate that content across platforms. And two, they realize that the URL, the page itself, is not the most meaningful place to evaluate whether the content's working or not.
We hear this similar of being able to understand what piece of content on the page drove the traffic or the engagement or the conversion. Because if it's working, I want to go reuse it in a whole bunch of other places, right?
Totally. Yeah.
It's not always about creating new versions of content. It's actually reusing the ones that are working.
100%. And I'm such a fan of organizations really thinking strategically about how they can get the most value from the assets that they produce. Like, I work with a number of businesses that produce case studies, whether it's a hospital with a patient case study or whether it's a B2B firm with a client case study. And often those are very high production tasks. Like, they're recording video and they're getting quotes and they're doing interviews, and, it's people's time. You should get the most value out of that resource as possible. It can't just be something that you stick up on a web page and then it's, well, no, we never have to think about that again. You want to make sure that those videos can appear in context, or that quotes or proof points from the case study can be used in different places to bring attention to it. You want to drive traffic to it effectively. So, what are the other channels that you're using to promote that content? It's a system.
Yeah. You spoke earlier about the different channels and how oftentimes organizations are set up. Their team structures are set up by channel, right? They have a team for the website, and they have a team for email, and they have a team for social media, and that's oftentimes where the breakdown happens, is when you want a consistent message across all of those digital channels and you have different teams operating independently or in silos. That's hard to do. So you mentioned earlier, it's not just a technology change, create once, reuse everywhere. It's also the people in the process. Talk to me. How do you get customers to rethink, maybe reorg around in a different way?
Yeah, I would say that working with clients on potential reorgs or recommended reorgs is one of the things that we do. I had a client in the healthcare space a few years back that actually reorged their marketing team. Previously, it was organized around channels, and they really felt that they weren't, if they were breakdowns, handoffs, people were too siloed. So they reorged around their audiences and created cross-functional teams where the team focused on that particular audience or that particular, what they were delivering in the market, that product they were delivering, and cross-trained everyone so that they could handle all of the pieces of it. PR is one that's a little bit tricky because there are some specialized relationships in the PR space. But for email, for web, for mobile, for social, for search, there's really no reason why everyone can't have some familiarity with what needs to get done there. And you might have people who are more skilled in one thing than another, but it just is a more effective way to make sure that the messaging is consistent for the audiences you're trying to reach. And honestly, it's a more effective way to manage, because if, somebody wants to go on vacation or whatever, you have people who are cross-trained, and it's not like oh gosh, like, well, how are we going to get the email out this week if so-and-so is gone?
Exactly. All right. I'm going to pause here just to recap. We've talked a little bit about composable architectures, right? How does a solution like this fit into the broader architecture around, DAMs and personalization engines and, product information systems, et cetera, CDPs. We've talked about the value of composable content. Let's maybe move into kind of the next part of the conversation, Karen, which is why should organizations do something now? Like, why is there a sense of urgency around this? How does an organization find themselves being left behind if they don't do something right now? And I'm kind of curious, when you're talking to organizations, how do you have them have a sense of urgency or convince them to have a sense of urgency around this?
So I think one point that I really do consistently try to make is that organizations are wasting a lot of money and time on processes that don't serve their needs and platforms that are not designed to do what they want. I mean, it is extremely common for me to work with clients where publishing something new can take them 3 months. And it's painful to hear. And I mean, my job is to go through the entire process. And so I understand what is happening at each stage, but it's extremely cumbersome. And if I were a marketer, if I were an executive and working in a business where the digital publishing process was that painful, I would really be questioning, like, how much money am I spending on this expensive product? And why doesn't it actually help us become a more effective business? And again, the product is not going to save you, but sometimes people really need to say, okay, we are going to stop doing this and we're going to rethink how we do this. We're probably going to delete a lot of content that we don't need to be maintained anymore. And we're going to think about our content and the content model as a system. We're going to think about the design system and how those two things work together. And as a result, it's not going to take us, 3 months and 1 million Jira tickets to publish something new. I think, honestly, like, I think Adobe Experience Manager costs way too much and it does not always get you where you want to go. And I think, there's a lot of reasons why enterprise businesses might have chosen a legacy platform like that at one point, but smart ones are going to be thinking like it's time to modernize. And honestly, I mean, to be honest, like, for many organizations, the big driving factor is that their current contract is up or their current system is going to be sunset. The long-awaited, long-rumored Drupal 7 end of life is going to be happening a year from now. And that's half of Drupal's audience. Like, half of their users are on Drupal 7 and the other half are on every other version of Drupal. So it's going to be a big reckoning. Like, every one of those organizations, if they're not thinking right now, what are we going to do when this product isn't supported anymore? Now is the time to start thinking about that. And composable is it's like, you have to consider that at this point.
Yeah. We hear that quite often as well. We also hear when we talk to marketers, there's this fatigue around, the 15 different tools that they have to use just to create a digital experience. I go into my digital asset management system and I set up some assets or new videos that I want to use. And then I'm going into my PIM system and I'm creating some product information. And then I have to go into personalization engine and set up a personalization campaign. And oh, by the way, I have content that lives in 2 or 3 different CMSs because my company hasn't strategized on one yet. And they kind of come to us and they're like, help us solve this. I want one place, a hub, a central place that I log into that brings all of this content together, presents it to me so that I can do something cool and unique and differentiated, fast. We keep coming back to fast and efficiency. Like, I don't want this to take 3 weeks to stand this up. I want this to take 3 minutes to put this together. Mm-hmm. And also recognizing, like, content will always live in a bunch of different places. Like, that's just the nature of large organizations. We're never going to say all content should live in one place. And so at Contentful, this is the kind of problem that we like to solve. We actually released something new this last fall or about 4 months ago that solves this particular problem of bringing everything together into one hub. I'm just curious, like, is this a problem that you hear customers talking about? How do you help them rethink this idea of bringing everything together into one place to create something compelling and unique?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is probably the big challenge, but also the big opportunity for organizations that are starting to think in this new way. They will have to manage multiple different products and multiple different relationships. Like that's the trade-off is you can pick and choose what you want. It's a best of breed solution, but you will have to manage the APIs and the microservices between them. So what's compelling about Composable and, as this space evolves, is the orchestration layer that you use to control all of that. So it's something that is designed to enable you to hook up to all of these different systems and have a consistent place where people can go and get that data in. Managing everything through APIs gives you that capacity. It still means that you have to think about what those integrations are. It still means that you have to think about what that workflow will be or should be, and probably have to do some interface design, work within the system to make sure that works for your authors. But the opportunity is really like, yes, you can design that yourself. And as a result, even though you have 15 different systems, for the people who are using it, it will feel like an integrated whole. And that I think is so powerful and such both, it saves time for sure. But I'm really fond of saying what that frees up is your brilliant marketers to spend more time doing the thing that they're supposed to be doing, which is connecting with your audiences and creating great content and assets, and not just on fighting, and copying and pasting and moving, between different systems. There's a high cognitive cost to doing that.
Yeah, agree. Like the context switching of having to go through different tools, and it's got to be exhausting.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So kind of key point here, if I was to summarize, is like, don't wait, lean in, think about what this would mean to your organization to do something now. Why should you be doing it now? What could it mean for the company? And this idea that recognizing that Composable will probably be made up of a few different architectures or solutions in that architecture. But if done right, it can actually solve kind of that day-to-day life of marketers and allow them to create more compelling, experiences much faster. All right. Let's take that one step further, kind of building on that idea of there's going to be many probably solutions in the overall architecture. At Contentful, we think a lot about this as kind of like the ecosystem, right? As much as we would like to put ourselves in the middle, the sun, I think the better role or person in the middle is the consumer, right? The individual that is coming to your digital experiences and seeing and using and interacting with them. But there's a number of solutions that revolve around that customer and that consumer that's coming. So, and one of those that I think is probably the hot topic that everyone's talking about, I think I'm legally required to mention this in every conversation, is generative AI. It has come crashing onto the scene. Every software platform you have to be doing something. And we are as well at Contentful, and we're thinking about this a lot. I want to talk to you about, like, where are your customers at? How do they think about generative AI? Do you see some being all in? Are some in that curious phase? Like, we're not quite sure. Is it more, let's use it to augment work, not replace work? Like, what are you seeing from your customer base around how they're thinking about AI?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it's generative AI. It's the topic on everybody's lips these days. I think most of the organizations that I talk to are still in the curious phase. I think everyone is experimenting and exploring a little bit, but it isn't something that they're going all in on. Maybe one client. I would say maybe more all in. I'm
sure what an industry they're in, by the way. Now, don't tell us the name, but like, is there an industry that's a little bit more all in than others?
They are a hardware company in the technology industry. So I think they maybe have a little bit of a head start as well on thinking about what AI will do for their industry. I personally think, I really guide people toward thinking about it as augmenting people's work rather than replacing people. I think there's a huge amount of opportunity for large language models to help out in the process. Like, one of the things that we are experimenting with at Autogram is being able to do automated metadata tagging with existing bodies of content. So developing a taxonomy or a faceted taxonomy that an organization has their industries and their stages of the customer journey and, whatever, like a bunch of whatever those things they want to track. And being able to use a large language model to have it give us its best guess of which of those taxonomy terms it should be tagged with. I'm very curious. I have not seen a product that is doing it really well yet, but I think for marketers that are dealing with a large amount of customer data, they're getting surveys in or, a large amount of free-form data. Using a large language model to do sentiment analysis and keyword tagging and identify promising, useful quotes. I think that would be extremely useful. And again, it's not replacing a researcher or a marketer. It's enabling them to get insights into the data faster.
Yep. It's augmenting. It's making their job easier, not replacing. Yeah.
Yep.
How important is it I want to talk about this large language model. I see more and more customers, one of their questions oftentimes is around, how do I go create that LLM, that large language model? And I want that based off of my content, right? I don't want it trained based on the internet. I want it based off of my content. And I oftentimes say, well, the first thing you need then is structured content. You need content that has meaning, that it can then be used to power your large language model. Are you, if you don't have your content with structure and meaning, it's going to be tough to train it. Am I on the right path as I'm thinking about that, or how do you
Completely. I really do believe that organizations that want to build their own LLMs in-house are going to have to do the work to develop their taxonomies, develop their metadata. They have to understand the structure of their content. I honestly see a lot of similarities to where generative AI is right now from where personalization has been over the past decade or so. I've worked with a number of clients that executives were all dazzled by the prospect of personalization. But once you got in there, it was like, well, you need all of this data structured in order to personalize it, because how are you going to create the variations that you need if you don't have the pieces that you're working with? And so that was, it's exciting, the organizations that, like they had the light bulb moment and were able to start thinking about how to do personalization at scale. And I think the same thing will happen for LLMs.
I'm with you. I think personalization plus generative AI might actually be what unlocks the value of personalization and makes it actually do the idea of creating variation. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Let's get to the audience here. I want to see if there's any questions that have come in. By the way, Karen, you have been great. Thank you so much for chatting with us.
It's been so fun. I would talk to you all day if I could.
Jared, what do we have?
We got some audience questions here. But first, I want to thank you, Karen and Sarah, for that excellent discussion. That was fantastic. Up first, Karen, you spoke a little bit about the mindset change at the top of the hour. What would you say are like the top 3 things needed to adapt a more composable approach?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that question's so easy. I'm going to let you take that, Karen.
I think for an organization that wants to move or is, composable curious, I think probably the first thing that they're going to need is a good understanding of the content that they're working with already. And that's going to mean some kind of inventory and audit to understand, like, what metadata do they have now? How is that content structured? And what's going to happen when they try to migrate it? Second, they're going to need a content model that has a plan for, how that content should be structured in the future, what those content types are, and really thinking about, I guess I would say there's usually sort of a spectrum between content that is very structured, very templated, and product information or, things that you may have variations on it, but it all sort of follows the same model, versus things that are one-offs that are maybe created for a specific purpose, for a specific moment in time. And perhaps that content will not need to be reused in other places, or perhaps it's something that will have a shorter time horizon before it's no longer needed. And you might want to think about those types of content in different ways. And then finally, I think you need an understanding of how the work of the people who are creating the content will interact with how the web, digital, whatever it is, actually gets created and produced. Is it something where marketers are doing it? Is it something where you need to connect to an asset management system? Is it something where you're going to have production people who maybe work in the development team or maybe work in the marketing team who take content and actually produce the assets or the pages or whatever? A design system is usually an important piece of that. And I think for me, that's maybe one of the most important pieces of it, is thinking about the content model and the design system as being related, but not the same system. They have to work together, but they don't convey the same things, and you don't talk about what the content is or the design is in the same way.
Sure. Karen, maybe I can add a fourth, which is, don't go it alone. I feel like so many organizations try to figure, there's a lot out there to try to, what do we need to be thinking about? And I think there's organizations like yourself, Karen, you and your colleagues that are out helping customers figure this out. Contentful, we give away, trials and versions of our software to customers to play around with it so they can see we can do this in a week. It doesn't take us a year to set something up. And so I think there's a lot of organizations that are out here willing and able to help you as organizations that are trying to tackle this and on how to do it. By engaging us, we can help accelerate the process and get you to value much faster than if you try to figure it out alone. So I would say call us, right? Call Karen, call me.
All right. Got another question here for Karen. How finalized and how fully baked does my content strategy need to be before deciding on the right platform?
I mean, there's how I want it to be, which is that organizations at least spend some time thinking through the strategy before selecting a platform. But honestly, from my vantage point, it doesn't always work that way. Many times there are technology or business reasons that are driving the selection of the new platform, and organizations don't start doing the strategic planning work until they know what platform they're going to use. You know what? There are, I guess, pros and cons to both models. I really do believe that different systems think about the content in different ways. And you want to make sure that the system that you pick is going to align with what you want your workflow to be. So I would say if I could wave my magic wand, it would be that, everybody would spend at least, a few weeks, a few months before embarking on a vendor review process, planning out some of the things about what their workflows and strategy need to be.
Sure. Excellent. And I think we got a time for another one here. For Sarah, got a question here. I am a content director. Do I need a developer to help me get started with a composable content solution?
No. I think, if you look at the well-designed solutions on the market today, like Contentful, they're built to serve a marketing audience. And so if you're a content director, you don't need to necessarily have technical folks involved. At some point, yes, when you get into the nitty-gritty of the implementation, but to begin looking at this and thinking about this and what it could mean for your organization, you're in the perfect spot to begin those conversations.
Fantastic. And I think that's going to be our time for today. I want to thank Karen and Sarah again for their excellent presentation. And I want to thank Contentful for making today's webinar possible. And last but not least, I'd like to thank everybody out in the audience for your time and attention. Today's webinar has been recorded, so you'll be receiving a link to that recording in a follow-up email. So keep an eye on your inbox for that. In the meantime, thank you all once again, and we will see you on the next one.